3 years ago, she walked out of that marriage with nothing but scars and a reputation for being a gold-digging leech. 3 years later, her company is about to go public, and her ex-husband's family has come circling back like sharks scenting blood in the water. Your brother-in-law hit someone. Bring $70,000. Same script. Same faces. Same suffocating entitlement. They thought she was still the woman they could squeeze dry. They didn't know that the woman who crawled out of hell had grown teeth. Elena, some woman has called the office line about a dozen times, Sophie said, leaning through the doorway of my office with a pinched expression on her face. She says it's urgent. Says you need to call her back immediately. She told me her name is Margaret Zimmer. She said she's your former mother-in-law. My fingers stopped dead on the keyboard. Margaret Zimmer. The name hit me like a rusted blade, slicing clean through 3 years of carefully constructed peace. After the divorce, I had switched cities, changed my number, erased every traceable connection to that life. I had even altered my name, from Elena Lin to Elena Lin, as if a single letter could sever the last thread binding me to that nightmare. But they had found me anyway. Like flies drawn to rot. Like leeches tasting blood in the water. It didn't matter how far you ran or how long you hid, they would always find a way to latch on and drain you dry. Elena. Sophie's voice wavered. She had never seen me like this. Should I tell her you're not available? No. I closed my laptop, wrapped both hands around my coffee mug, and let the bitterness settle on my tongue. 3 years. 3 years of clawing my way out of hell, and the mere mention of that woman's name was enough to make my palms sweat, my heart hammer against my ribs. Every memory I had tried to bury, every degradation, every gaslighting remark, every moment of being treated like I was nothing, all of it surged up from whatever grave I had tried to stuff it into. Give me the number. Sophie handed me a sticky note with a local area code scrawled across it. I stared at those digits for a long time, long enough that Sophie shifted her weight uncomfortably and reached as if to take the note back, thinking I had changed my mind. I dialed. The call connected on the first ring. Elena Lin. Is that you, Elena? Margaret's voice exploded through the speaker, shrill and breathless, carrying the same suffocating authority I remembered from every single day of my marriage. 3 years. The woman's voice hadn't changed one bit. Not the pitch, not the cadence, not the way she barked my name like she was summoning a servant. Finally, you called back, she snapped before I could get a word in. We've got a crisis. Your brother hit someone with his car. The other party wants $70,000 to settle it privately, or they're calling the cops. You need to bring the money right now. Don't dawdle. $70,000. The number was absurd, inflated, clearly designed to create maximum panic. I felt my jaw tighten. She rattled it all off in one breath, as if she had rehearsed it, as if there had never been a 3-year silence between us, as if I was still the daughter-in-law she could yank around by the throat. I leaned back in my chair, letting my gaze drift to the framed photo on my desk, my company's leadership team, all of us standing together at last year's retreat. I was in the center, smiling with the confidence of someone who had built something from nothing, someone who had refused to stay buried. And yet, Margaret's voice was a skeletal hand, gnarled and insistent, reaching through the phone to drag me back into a darkness I thought I had escaped forever. Margaret, I said. My voice came out steady, calmer than I expected. First of all, your son Nathan and I have been divorced for 3 years. Legally, morally, socially, I have no connection whatsoever to the Zimmer family. Second, the brother you're referring to is Nathan's younger brother, Chris. He is not my brother. He is not my family. Third, I don't have $70,000. And even if I did, I would not spend a single cent cleaning up a mess made by a stranger who apparently thinks he can buy his way out of consequences. Elena. Margaret's voice sliced through the line, high and jagged as broken glass. The sound of it made my teeth clench, an involuntary physical response I hadn't felt in years. "Are you even human?" she shrieked. "Chris is your brother. He's the only son of the Zimmer family. You watched him grow up. Divorce doesn't erase that bond. You were his sister-in-law. Are you really going to stand there and tell me that means nothing to you? Are you really that cold? That ungrateful?" She was building up steam now, her voice climbing in both volume and righteous fury. "Don't you remember who took you in when you first came to this city? Who gave you a roof over your head and food on your table? You were a nobody from nowhere, a country girl who would have starved on the streets if Nathan hadn't married you. Every single dollar in your bank account belongs to this family. If it weren't for us." "Margaret," I interrupted, and this time I did not call her Mrs. Zimmer. The word came out flat, final, like a door slamming shut. "Are you finished?" Silence on the other end. Just a heartbeat of it, but I could feel her trying to recalibrate, trying to figure out why her usual script wasn't working. "If you're not finished," I continued, my voice almost conversational, "please, go ahead. I've got all the time in the world." That threw her completely. The old Elena would have been crying by now. Would have been apologizing, begging, offering up every last cent in her bank account to make the conflict go away. The old Elena would have spent the night sleepless and shaking, and by morning would have handed over everything she had to fix whatever mess Chris Zimmer had made. This Elena sounded like she was discussing the weather. What kind of attitude is this?" Margaret's voice flickered, and beneath the outrage, I caught something else, a thin thread of genuine confusion, maybe even unease. "I am your mother. How dare you speak to me like this? You're not my mother." My voice was quiet but precise, each syllable landing like a small, sharp stone. "You're Nathan's mother. You're nothing to me. Do I need to remind you what happened 3 years ago? Outside the courthouse. You stood in front of everyone, in front of strangers on the sidewalk, and called me a barren whore. You said marrying me was the worst mistake the Zimmer family ever made. Your son threw the divorce papers in my face and told me to sign and get out." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "So I got out. And now," I said, my voice dropping to something just above a whisper, "what possible audacity makes you think you can call me and demand a single thing?" I hung up. The office went quiet. So quiet I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning vent, the distant click of a keyboard somewhere down the hall. Sophie was still standing in the doorway, her mouth slightly open. In the 2 years she had worked for me, she had never seen me raise my voice, never seen me be anything other than warm and calm and unfailingly kind. The woman standing in front of her now must have looked like a stranger. "Elena." "It's fine." I set the phone down on my desk and managed a small smile. "You can go back to work." She nodded, turned, and left. When the door clicked shut, I heard her exhale sharply in the hallway. Only then did I notice my hands. They were shaking. Not from fear, from rage. 3 years of suppressed fury had finally found an exit, and now it was rushing through me like a flood through a broken dam, hot and unstoppable and almost dizzying in its intensity. My phone buzzed again. "Margaret." I declined. It buzzed again. Another decline. Then a new number. Then another. I watched the unknown digits flash on my screen and felt something cold settle in my chest. I turned the phone off. I needed silence. I needed to be alone with my thoughts. But Margaret, predictably, had other plans. 5 minutes later, the front desk line rang. Sophie burst back through my door, her face pale. "Elena, there's something happening downstairs." My stomach tightened. "What?" "There's a woman. Maybe in her 60s. She's sitting on the ground outside the building entrance. She's crying and shouting." Sophie's voice was strained. "She's saying you're her daughter-in-law. She's saying you stole the family's money and ran off, and now you're refusing to help when they're in trouble. There's a crowd forming. People are recording on their phones." Sophie swallowed hard. "She's holding a sign. What does it say?" Sophie's eyes dropped to the floor. She looked almost physically ill. "It says, Elena Lin, worth millions, refuses to help family in crisis." I let out a short, humorless laugh. Of course she did. Margaret Zimmer hadn't changed one bit. In her mind, she was never wrong. She could show up anywhere, a courthouse, a workplace, the middle of a busy downtown street, and scream whatever accusation she wanted, because she genuinely believed the world owed her an audience. She believed she was the hero of every story she told. The old Elena had let that narrative swallow her whole. I had met Nathan Zimmer when I was 24. I was fresh out of graduate school, newly hired at a marketing firm, trying to build a life in a city that chewed up people like me and spat them back out. Nathan was charming when he wanted to be, all easy smiles and promises. His mother, Margaret, had sized me up at our first meeting like I was livestock at auction. Pretty enough, she had said, not to me but about me, as if I weren't standing right there. But from a small town, right? Not much family money. And yet, when we got married, the down payment on our house came from my savings, every penny my parents had scraped together over a lifetime, plus 3 years of my own income. Margaret never mentioned that. Nor did she mention that when Nathan's business venture failed and he was drowning in debt, it was me who worked double shifts, me who took on freelance projects late into the night, me who paid off every last creditor dollar by agonizing dollar. And when Chris, the so-called golden boy of the Zimmer family, got himself tangled up in gambling debts and predatory loans, it was me, the outsider, the country girl, who emptied my last private savings to bail him out. And Nathan was in our bed with a client. The bed I had bought. In the house I had paid for. When I caught them, his first words weren't an apology. They were, "If you make a scene, I'll make sure you walk away with nothing." He kept that promise. In the divorce, the house, which I had funded almost entirely, was claimed by Margaret as the premarital family property. The car was transferred into the name of Nathan's mistress. Years of my hard-earned money disappeared into the black hole of joint marital debt, a concept their lawyer wielded like a scalpel, cutting me out of everything I had built. I walked away with nothing but a pile of fabricated debts and a scar above my left eyebrow from the night Nathan had shoved me into the coffee table. On my way out the door, Margaret stood on the front porch and spat at my feet. "Bad luck," she called after me. "That's what you are. Everything went wrong for this family the day you showed up. Go on, get out. Go as far as you can. A woman like you. No one else will ever want you. You're worthless." I went. It took 3 years. 3 years of working myself to the bone. 3 years of building a business from scratch, surviving on caffeine and sheer spite, clawing my way up from negative net worth to something that resembled success. My brand got noticed. My company got funded. Next month, we close our Series A. I bought a house in the city. Paid in full. No mortgage, no co-signer, no man's name anywhere on the deed. And last month, I bought my sister Lucy an apartment. A small one, nothing extravagant, a one-bedroom condo with good light and a view of the park. When I handed her the keys, she cried for half an hour. She held on to me like she was afraid I might disappear. "Do you remember," she said, her voice breaking, "the night you got kicked out? I followed you. You didn't know. I stayed half a block behind, and I watched you sit down at a bus stop and pull a sandwich out of your bag, just bread, nothing in it, and you ate it like it was the only meal you'd had all day." Lucy's voice cracked. "I swore right then I would work until my hands bled, and I would buy you a house one day. A real one." I had pulled her close and pressed my lips to the top of her head. "Now it's my turn," I said. "Now I buy the house." She had given up art school for me. She had worked in a factory for 3 years so I could finish my degree. Her fingers still had scars from the sewing machine needles. Every one of those scars was etched into my conscience. That was why I worked. That was why I fought. Not just for myself, for the people Margaret Zimmer had dismissed as worthless. My parents. My sister. The family I chose. Now, staring down at my silent, darkened phone, I felt something shift in my chest. Let them come. My phone buzzed again. Another new number. I answered without speaking. "Elena, no, wait, Elena, please." The voice on the other end was young, male, slurred with alcohol and barely contained panic. "You've got to help me. Please. I'm in trouble. I owe people money, bad people, and they said if I don't pay, they'll break my hands. Please, please, just this one last time. Chris Zimmer. The golden boy. The only heir." 3 years ago, I had paid off his debts. 3 years later, here he was again, the same broken record, spinning through the same desperate pleas. "Chris," I said quietly. "Do you remember what you told me the last time I bailed you out?" The sobbing on the other end hitched. "You said, Elena, I'll repay you someday. I'll work like a dog. I'll be in your debt forever." I let the silence stretch. "It's been 3 years, Chris. How's that repayment going?" He sputtered, scrambling for an answer. Then his voice changed, the desperation curdling into something uglier, something with teeth. I was young back then. I didn't know what I was saying. "You're rich now, what's a little money to you?" He was gaining momentum, the victimhood settling over him like a familiar coat. "Besides, you owe us. If it weren't for our family taking you in, you'd be nothing. You'd still be some nobody from the sticks. Show some gratitude for once in your life." Then his tone shifted again. It dropped, became quieter, almost intimate in its menace. "You know, Elena, I've been doing some reading. Your sister Lucy, she works at that design firm downtown, right? On Westwood Avenue. And your parents, they're still in that little house on Cedar Street, aren't they? The one with the blue mailbox." My fingers tightened around the phone until my knuckles went white. "You've got people you care about too," Chris said. "Right?" Outside my window, lightning split the sky. Thunder rolled in behind it, deep and ominous. The weather had turned, dark clouds swallowing the afternoon sun. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down. She was still there, Margaret, in her faded purple coat, hair coming loose from its clips, pounding the pavement with her fists like a toddler throwing a tantrum. The crowd around her had grown. Phones were raised. Some of the faces in that crowd belonged to my employees, standing awkwardly at the edges, unsure whether to intervene. No one was stopping her, because every word she screamed was a weapon aimed at my head. Elena Lin. You heartless, ungrateful woman. You stole our family's money and used it to start your company. You live in a luxury apartment while we scrape by. Now your brother-in-law is in trouble and you won't lift a finger. How can you be so cruel? So selfish. Everyone, look. Look at this woman. Worth millions, and she lets her family suffer. Her voice carried through the glass, muffled but unmistakable. The same voice that had called me a curse, a disgrace, a barren, worthless thing. I thought about the night everything ended. I had come home late from work, exhausted, my feet aching from 12 hours in heels I couldn't afford. The lights were on. I remember thinking that was strange. Nathan never waited up. I opened the bedroom door. She was there. The woman. In my bed. Her hair spread across my pillows. I don't remember screaming. I remember lunging, my hands reaching for something, her throat, her hair, I don't know. Nathan was suddenly there, shoving me backward. I hit the coffee table. My head snapped against the edge, and for a moment the world went white. When my vision cleared, there was blood running into my eye. Margaret came out of the guest room. She looked at me on the floor. She looked at the blood on my face. And she said, "Stop crying. Men have needs. Look at yourself. Did you really think you could keep a man like my son satisfied?" That night, I sat on a bus stop bench with my sleeve pressed to the cut on my forehead. It was raining. The streets were empty. An ambulance came. They asked if I wanted to report the assault. I said no. Because some stupid, naive part of me still believed Nathan would come after me. That he would apologize. That 3 years of marriage meant something. He didn't call. Not once. Margaret sent a text, "Pay for your own medical bills. Don't expect a cent from this family." I pressed a button on my desk remote. The blind slid shut, cutting off the view of the chaos below. Then I picked up my office phone and dialed. "Sophie, don't ask security to remove her. Let her perform. Let her make as much noise as she wants. And call Attorney Chin. Tell him to come to my office immediately. Also, pull the security footage from the lobby cameras. All of it. I want every second archived." Sophie was silent for a beat. Then, "Okay, Elena. I'm on it." When I hung up, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was an old tin box, dented and rusted at the edges. No jewelry. No bonds. Just paper. On top, a bank transfer receipt, dated 3 years ago. Payee, Nathan Zimmer. Amount, $11,900. In the memo line, in my own handwriting, "Final debt repayment for Chris Zimmer." That was the 8th loan I had paid off. Add in the others, and the total came to nearly $30,000. Not counting the monthly, family contributions I had made to Margaret's household expenses. Money that had disappeared into Chris's gambling binges and Margaret's shopping sprees, while I wore the same winter coat for 4 years because I couldn't justify spending money on myself. Beneath the receipts, a copy of the divorce decree. One line was circled in red ink: "Both parties confirm there is no joint marital property to divide and no child custody to dispute." No joint marital property. I had paid the down payment. I had paid the mortgage. But because Nathan's name was on the deed, a decision I had made out of love, out of trust, out of the foolish belief that marriage meant sharing, the house was legally his. And every dollar I had poured into it was legally a gift. Margaret had smiled at me on my way out the door. Next time, sweetheart, be smarter about whose name you put on things. I learned that lesson. I learned it so thoroughly it became part of my bones. At the very bottom of the tin box, a family photo. 5 years old. Me, standing awkwardly at the edge of the frame, while Margaret and her husband sat in the center with Nathan and Chris flanking them. I was the afterthought. The outsider. I hadn't realized it then, but the arrangement wasn't accidental. Margaret had positioned me there deliberately, a visual reminder of my place in her hierarchy. I stared at the photo for a long moment. Then I closed the tin box and slid it back into the drawer. Some memories only bring pain. But some you have to keep. Because if you forget them, you'll make the same mistakes all over again. The office phone rang again. Elena, Sophie said, her voice strange, there's a man on the line. Says his name is Nathan Zimmer. Says he's your ex-husband. He's demanding to speak with you. He sounds aggressive. Nathan. The name slammed into my brain like a physical blow. It brought with it a wave of nausea, not from lingering attachment but from pure, visceral revulsion, the kind of disgust you feel when you discover something rotting in your refrigerator. I steadied my voice. Put him through. No greeting. No preamble. Just that voice, the one I had once loved, then hated, now simply wanted to forget. Elena. What the hell do you think you're doing? His tone was a perfect echo of his mother's, righteous indignation, as if I had committed some unforgivable crime by refusing to be his family's punching bag. My mother is sitting outside your building in the rain. Are you even aware of that? And Chris is in serious trouble. He owes money to people you don't want to cross. Vincent Shaw. You've heard of him. You know what kind of people he's connected to. If anything happens to Chris, what does any of that have to do with me? The question stopped him cold. For a second, there was only silence. Then his voice exploded through the speaker. What does it have to do with you? Are you out of your mind? Chris is family. You watched him grow up. The Elena I married would never. The Elena you married, I said, my voice dropping to something soft and dangerous, doesn't exist anymore. Another silence. Then he laughed, that condescending, cruel laugh I remembered so well. When Nathan couldn't win an argument with logic, he never apologized. He pivoted. He went for the jugular. Have you forgotten, he said, his voice turning silky and vicious, that you begged me? On your knees. In the doorway of our house. You grabbed my pant leg and sobbed like a lunatic. You said you'd do anything. Remember that, Elena? Remember what you promised my mother? That you'd always listen to her. That you'd always obey. I closed my eyes. And now you're acting like you're too good for us. Let me tell you something. Every dollar you have, you owe to me. If I hadn't pushed you, hadn't made your life a living hell, you never would have been desperate enough to succeed. You should be thanking me. You want to play hardball? Fine. Let's see how well your precious company holds up under an audit. I still have friends at the city regulator's office. And I've been inside your offices, Elena. I've taken photos. Some things might be open to interpretation. A well-timed complaint, Anne. Nathan. I leaned back in my chair. Are you done? Good. here's what's going to happen. You can file whatever complaints you want. Go ahead. Make all the noise you want. But you should know 2 things. I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. First, my legal team will be here within the hour. Second, and this is important, so listen carefully, this phone call is being recorded. Extortion. Threats. Criminal intimidation. Do you know what the sentencing guidelines are for that? The silence on the other end was absolute. Nathan. Are you still there? The line exploded. Elena, you goddamn. I hung up. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. From fury. 3 years of suppressed rage, finally rushing to the surface, hot and fierce and liberating. I picked up my personal phone and dialed. Detective Wong. It's Elena Lin. That investigation we discussed, I'm authorizing it. Full scope. Nathan Zimmer. Everything, financial records, personal relationships, current marriage status. And I need you to look into someone named Vincent Shaw. Possible connection to an extortion scheme. Money is not an object. I hung up and made another call. Attorney Chin. It's Elena. The materials we prepared, I'm activating them. All of it. Miss Lin. Chen's voice was measured. Are you certain? Once we start, there's no pulling back. 3 years ago, I said, I was thrown out of a house I paid for. I've been pulling myself back together ever since. Trust me, Mr. Chin. I've had no way to go but forward for a very long time. I understand. He paused. There is one more thing. If the Zimmer family managed to locate you so precisely, your office, your contact information, it suggests someone is feeding them information. Someone close to you. I felt a cold prickle at the back of my neck. Not fear, exactly. Something more like the pressure drop before a hurricane. Before I could respond, the door burst open. Sophie stood in the doorway, her face ashen, her voice cracking. Elena, you need to see this. The situation downstairs just escalated. Margaret brought people. There's a guy, a big bald guy with a metal pipe. He smashed the lobby door. They're inside the building. They've got signs with your face on them. Elena, the signs. What do they say? Sophie's voice broke completely. They say, Elena Lin, pay up or your blood is next. Lightning tore the sky apart outside my window. Thunder crashed so close the glass rattled in its frame. Rain lashed against the building in sheets, hard as fists pounding on a door. I stood at the window and looked at my reflection in the dark glass, a woman in a tailored suit, makeup flawless, posture straight as a blade. There was no panic in that reflection. No fear. Just the cold, steady gaze of someone who had been through hell and come out the other side. I picked up my phone and dialed one last number. Is the live stream team ready? Ready, Elena. Equipment's in place. We can go live whenever you give the word. Good. I walked to my office door and pulled it open. The hallway beyond was chaos, voices echoing up from the stairwell, the distant crash of something breaking, Sophie's rapid footsteps as she ran toward the elevators. I stepped forward. As I walked, a memory surfaced unbidden. 3 years ago, the night I left. I was halfway down the front path when Margaret's voice rang out behind me, shrill and triumphant. Go on, Elena. Run away. You're nothing without this family. Nothing. 3 years later. Here I stood, in a building that housed a company I had built with my own 2 hands. wearing a suit I had paid for with my own money. Walking in heels that clicked against the marble floor with the authority of someone who owed nothing to anyone. The nothing girl was now Elena Lin. The worthless ex-wife was now the CEO about to be courted by venture capitalists. The woman who had been drained dry and thrown out like garbage. Today, she was calling in every debt. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors began to slide shut, I caught Sophie's eye. "Call the police," I said. The doors closed. "All right, then. Let's finish this." The elevator ride down was the longest of my life. I adjusted my collar in the mirrored walls, studying my own reflection. Sharp. Impeccable. Unreadable. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the one who had sat on that bus stop bench 3 years ago, bleeding from her forehead, wondering if life was even worth continuing. The doors opened. The noise hit first. Margaret's theatrical wailing. Men shouting. Glass crunching underfoot. The buzz of a crowd, dozens of voices layered over each other, the whole chaotic symphony echoing through the marble lobby of the building I had worked so hard to afford. I stepped out. The lobby was a war zone. The front door was shattered, glass glittering across the tile like scattered diamonds. A decorative vase near reception had been knocked over, water and flowers strewn across the floor. 2 security guards stood helplessly near the wall, outnumbered and unsure, their faces tight with the realization that they were in over their heads. Margaret was on the floor, of course, pounding her fists against the tile in a performance that would have been comical if it weren't so calculated. "Everyone, look. Look at this woman. A millionaire CEO. She stole everything from our family and now she won't lift a finger to help us. Justice. Someone give us justice." Next to her stood a bald man, broad and menacing, with a thick neck and a heavy gold chain that caught the fluorescent light. His fists were wrapped around a metal pipe. Behind him, 4 or 5 young men in hoodies shifted restlessly, their eyes darting around the lobby like they were casing it for valuables. The bald man was holding a sign. The words were scrawled in dripping red paint, "Elena Lin, $70,000 or your family pays." Margaret spotted me first. Her wailing cut off mid-sob. She scrambled to her feet with surprising agility for a woman her age and charged toward me, finger extended like a weapon. "Elena. Finally. You've got some nerve making us wait." The bald man turned. His eyes traveled over me slowly, deliberately, the tailored suit, the heels, the diamond studs in my ears. A greasy smile spread across his face. "So this is the famous Elena Lin." He hefted the pipe onto his shoulder. "Prettier than I expected. Mrs. Zimmer here tells me you owe the family a significant sum. I'm here to help collect. So what'll it be, Ms. Lin? You want to transfer the money now, or should my associates start doing an inventory of your office equipment?" His men snickered. I said nothing. Sophie appeared at my elbow, breathless, her voice barely a whisper. "Elena, they smashed the door before security could stop them. One of the guards got hit. We already called 911. Call the cops all you want." The bald man spread his arms wide, playing to the crowd. "I'm just here collecting a legitimate debt. Debt collection isn't a crime, sweetheart, it's business. This woman here," he jabbed a thick finger in my direction, "she married into the Zimmer family with nothing, lived off their generosity for years, and the moment she got successful, she kicked them to the curb. Now her brother-in-law is in trouble and she won't help. That's the kind of person you're dealing with, folks." He turned to the crowd, performing for the cameras. "What kind of monster lets her own family suffer? Am I right? Margaret, emboldened, picked up the chorus. She's heartless. Worthless. She was nothing before we took her in. Every penny she has should be ours. The crowd murmured. Phones were raised. The digital court of public opinion was in session, and for the moment, Margaret was winning. Let me ask you something. My voice cut through the noise like a blade. Not loud, quiet, deliberate, precise. The lobby went still. I stepped forward, my heels crunching on broken glass. Margaret. You say I owe you. You say I stole from you. So let's clear this up right now, in front of all these witnesses. In front of the cameras. I gestured toward the back of the crowd, where the unmarked van was parked, its tinted window rolled down just enough to reveal the dark eye of a professional lens. I'm going to ask you a few questions. All you have to do is answer them honestly. Can you do that? Margaret's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes flicked toward the van. First question, I said, raising one finger. When Nathan and I got married, how much did the Zimmer family contribute to the wedding? The down payment on our house. The monthly mortgage. Give me a number. Margaret's mouth worked soundlessly. Second question. During the marriage, who paid off Nathan's business debts? Who paid off Chris's gambling loans, multiple times? Who covered the household expenses while your sons contributed nothing? Her face was going pale. Third. When I discovered Nathan's affair, how did your family respond? Did anyone apologize? Did anyone express remorse? I let the silence linger. Fourth. When we divorced, who walked away with the house? The car. The joint savings. And who walked away with nothing but fabricated debts and a scar above her eye? My voice had risen without my intending it to. It echoed off the marble walls, and in that moment, every person in the lobby was frozen, watching. You want evidence, Margaret? Fine. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Bank statements. Every down payment, every mortgage check, every debt repayment, all traceable to my accounts. The divorce decree, stating there was no joint property to divide. Do you want to know why? Because your family's lawyer made sure everything was in your names before I even knew what was happening. I held up another sheet. Here's a screenshot from a bus stop security camera, dated the night I was thrown out of your house. I'm sitting on the bench at 2 a.m., bleeding from a head wound, with nowhere to go. I paid a private investigator to pull this from the city archives. Do you want to see the medical records too? I held up the final document. And this is Nathan's marriage certificate to his current wife. Note the date. Less than 3 months after our divorce was finalized. Note the birth date of their first child, if you do the math. Adultery. Documented and verifiable. The crowd's murmuring shifted. The tone changed. I could feel it, the invisible tide of public opinion beginning to turn. Holy shit, someone muttered. This lady's not the villain. She's the victim. That old woman's been lying this whole time. The ex-husband cheated and she still had to pay. That's messed up. Margaret's face had gone from red to white to an ugly, mottled purple. She took a step backward, her eyes darting toward the bald man, looking for rescue. The bald man's expression had changed too. The smugness was draining away, replaced by something harder and more desperate. He wasn't stupid. He could feel control of the room slipping through his fingers. But he was also a man who had built his reputation on violence, and violence was all he had left. Enough. He slammed his pipe against the floor. The crack of metal on marble silenced the room. I don't give a damn about your divorce drama. That's not what I'm here for. $70,000, that's the number. You pay it, or what? My voice was ice. Or I know where your sister works. He took a step toward me. Lucy, right? That design firm on Westwood. And your parents, that little house on Cedar Street, blue mailbox, nice flower boxes in the windows. You might not care about your own safety, Miss Lin. But I'm guessing you care about theirs. The words landed like a physical blow. Not because they scared me. Because they confirmed what I already knew. These people would stop at nothing. They would use anyone. They would burn everything I loved to the ground if it got them what they wanted. My face didn't change. Not a flicker. You're threatening my family, I said. I'm making a business proposition, the bald man said, grinning. Bruno, that's me. I've been handling collections in this city for 15 years. And let me tell you something, I've never met anyone, man or woman, who didn't break eventually. So let's skip the theatrics. 70,000. Today. And I walk away, and you never see me again. Refuse? Well. He let his eyes drift meaningfully toward his pipe. I looked at him. I looked at Margaret, hovering behind him with a desperate, hungry expression. I looked at the shattered glass, the trembling security guards, the crowd of strangers recording every moment on their phones. Then my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Detective Wong. I answered. I put it on speaker. Miss Lin. Wong's voice was crisp, professional, clearly audible over the lobby's silence. I've completed the preliminary investigation. Chris Zimmer was not involved in any car accident. The so-called victim is a man named Eddie, a known associate of Vincent Shaw's with a prior fraud conviction. I've obtained recorded conversations between Shaw, Chris Zimmer, and Nathan Zimmer discussing the fabrication of the accident story. Margaret's face went chalk white. Furthermore, Wong continued, Chris Zimmer's debts are gambling-related, not accident-related. The $70,000 figure was chosen specifically because Nathan Zimmer learned through informal channels that you recently purchased a property for your sister and concluded you had liquidity. The scheme was designed to extract that amount from you. We have financial records, text messages, and witness testimony sufficient to support charges of conspiracy to commit extortion, fraud, and criminal intimidation. The lobby was dead silent. Every person in that room was frozen, listening. Additionally, Wong said, we've confirmed that the individual known as Bruno has an outstanding warrant for aggravated assault and extortion. We have units en route to your location now. I looked up at Bruno. His face had gone gray. The pipe in his hand suddenly looked less like a weapon and more like evidence. His men were already backing toward the shattered door, their earlier bravado evaporating. Thank you, Detective, I said into the phone. Please send me the full report when it's ready. I hung up. Bruno, was it? I took a step toward him. You wanted to know if I care about my family. Let me tell you something about myself. Another step. The last 3 years of my life, I've slept 4 hours a night. Every other waking moment, I've been working. Building. Clawing my way up from less than nothing. Do you know why? Do you know what drives a person to work that hard? I didn't wait for an answer. Because I made a promise. I promised myself that if anyone, ever tried to hurt the people I love again, I would have the resources to destroy them. Not just stop them. Destroy them. I was standing directly in front of him now, close enough to smell the sweat on his collar, the stale cigarette smoke clinging to his clothes. The woman you're looking for, the one who would panic and cave and write a check to make this go away. She died 3 years ago. On a bus stop bench. In the rain. With blood running down her face. The woman standing in front of you now is someone else entirely. Bruno opened his mouth. Whatever he was about to say was swallowed by the sudden, piercing wail of sirens, close, getting closer, multiple vehicles converging from different directions. His men broke. 2 of them bolted for the door. They made it about 10 feet before plainclothes officers appeared in the entrance, badges raised, blocking their escape. Police. Nobody move. The lobby filled with officers in tactical gear, moving with the practiced efficiency of a team that had done this many times before. Bruno's pipe clattered to the floor. His hands went up, too late, as 2 officers seized his arms and wrenched them behind his back. The click of handcuffs was loud in the sudden quiet. Margaret stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping on a dock. Margaret Zimmer. An officer approached her, holding up a document. You are being detained for questioning in connection with an extortion and criminal intimidation investigation. This is a formal summons. You have the right to an attorney. No. Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. Then it rose to a shriek. No. This is a mistake. She's the one who, she stole from us. You can't do this. I want my son. Where's Nathan? Nathan. As if summoned, another officer entered through the shattered doorway, escorting a handcuffed man in a rumpled suit. Nathan Zimmer looked like he had been dragged through a hedge backward. His tie was askew, his hair disheveled, and there was a fresh scratch across his cheek that looked suspiciously like fingernail marks. He looked up and saw me. The hatred in his eyes was almost a physical force. You. His voice was hoarse. You did this. You planned all of this. Nathan Zimmer, the arresting officer announced. You are being charged with conspiracy to commit extortion, fraud, and criminal intimidation. You have the right to remain silent. This is her fault. Nathan lunged against his restraints, his face contorted with rage. She's been plotting against us from the beginning. She's a liar. A manipulative, scheming. His voice cut off as the officers hauled him toward the door. Margaret screamed when she saw her son in handcuffs. It was a raw, animal sound, not grief, but fury. Fury that her world was collapsing. Fury that the woman she had dismissed as worthless had somehow, impossibly, won. You. She twisted in the grip of the female officer holding her arm, fixing me with a stare of pure, undiluted hatred. You think you've beaten us. You think this is over. It will never be over. You'll always owe us. You'll always. Her voice faded as the officers led her out. The lobby began to empty. The crowd dispersed slowly, buzzing with the electric energy of people who had just witnessed something unforgettable. Phones were still recording as they filed out. This would be all over social media within the hour, I knew. That was fine. Let it spread. The lead detective approached me. Ms. Lin, we'll need you to come to the station to give a formal statement. Take your time, there's no rush. Of course, I said. I'll be there this afternoon. He nodded, glanced around at the wreckage of the lobby, and shook his head. Hell of a way to spend a Tuesday. You have no idea, I said. When the last of the officers had gone, I stood alone in the ruined lobby, surrounded by broken glass and overturned furniture and the lingering echo of everything that had just happened. Sophie appeared at my side. Elena. Attorney Chin is upstairs. He's been watching from the security office. He said to tell you he's impressed. Tell him I'll be up in a minute. Sophie hesitated. Are you okay? I looked around the lobby. At the shattered door. At the glass glittering on the marble. At the spot where Margaret had sat, pounding her fists, trying to destroy me with nothing but her voice and her bottomless sense of entitlement. I'm better than okay, I said. I'm free. Attorney Chin was waiting in the conference room when I walked in. The table in front of him was covered with documents, legal briefs, evidence folders, a thick binder that I recognized as the comprehensive case file we had been building for months. Ms. Lin. He rose and inclined his head. The criminal side is solid. Extortion, conspiracy, criminal intimidation, with the recorded evidence and witness testimony, the district attorney's office is confident about prosecution. As for the civil side, he tapped a folder near his elbow. The original divorce settlement. We have grounds to challenge it. Fraud, coercion, concealment of assets. The 3-year statute of limitations normally would have been an issue, but since we only discovered the hidden assets last month, the clock starts from the date of discovery. We can go after the house. The money you paid toward the mortgage. The debts you covered for Chris Zimmer. All of it. He paused. And there's one more thing. The thing you asked me to prepare. From his briefcase, he withdrew a sealed envelope and slid it across the table toward me. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. A little girl, maybe 2 years old, grinning at the camera with a gap-toothed smile and bright, curious eyes. She had my nose. She had her own spirit, fierce and joyful and completely, utterly her own self. Lily. My daughter. The child no one in the Zimmer family knew existed. The child I had been pregnant with during the divorce, though I hadn't known it yet. The child I had carried alone, birthed alone, raised in secret with the help of my parents while I rebuilt my life from scratch. Lily. It meant purity, clarity, the promise of a new beginning. Are you sure you want to use this? Attorney Chin asked quietly. Once her existence is entered into the court record, the Zimmer family will know about her. Margaret will know. Nathan will know. I'm sure. I slid the photograph back into the envelope with steady hands. For years, Margaret called me barren. She told everyone who would listen that I was worthless, that I couldn't even give her a grandchild, that I had failed at the one thing a woman was supposed to do. My voice was calm, but beneath it ran a current of cold, hard vindication. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I was already pregnant when I left. I found out 2 months after the divorce was finalized. I want Margaret to know. I want her to understand that the barren woman she threw out was carrying her son's child. A daughter. A beautiful, healthy, perfect daughter who will never know the Zimmer name, never set foot in a Zimmer house, never be touched by the poison of that family. I looked up at Attorney Chin. They don't get to claim her. They don't get to see her. But they do get to know she exists. That's part of the justice. Attorney Chin was silent for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. Understood. He gathered his documents and stood to leave. At the door, he paused. Ms. Lin. For what it's worth, I've been practicing law for 25 years. I've seen a lot of messy divorces. A lot of bitter custody battles. But I've rarely seen someone fight their way back the way you have. Your daughter is lucky to have you. Thank you, I said. But I'm the lucky one. When he was gone, I sat alone in the conference room, watching the sky clear outside the window. The storm had passed. The clouds were breaking apart, and the late afternoon sun was beginning to slant through the glass, warm and golden. My phone buzzed. Lucy. Elena. I just got a call from the police. Those men who were following me, they've been arrested. They said Nathan hired them. We're safe. Elena, did you hear me? We're safe. I smiled. I heard you. You're incredible. You know that. You're actually incredible. Before I could respond, another message came through. Oh. Also, Dad sent you a video. Have you watched it yet? It's Lily. She did something new. I opened the video. The frame showed my parents' backyard, the old oak tree, the flower beds my mother tended obsessively, the patch of grass where Lily played on sunny afternoons. My daughter was standing in the middle of the frame, wobbling slightly, her chubby legs still uncertain on the uneven ground. She was wearing a yellow sundress and a floppy sun hat that kept sliding over her eyes. Go on, sweetie, my mother's voice urged from behind the camera. Say it again. Say it, Mama. Lily pulled the hat off her face and looked directly into the lens. Her mouth opened. Her brow furrowed with concentration. Ma, Ma. The sound hit me like a physical force. Again, my mother cried. Say it again, Lily. Lily beamed, her whole face lighting up with the joy of accomplishment, and shouted, Mama. I had not cried in the elevator. I had not cried facing down Bruno and his metal pipe. I had not cried while presenting my evidence to the crowd, or watching Margaret and Nathan being led away in handcuffs, or sitting across from Attorney Chin discussing the final destruction of everything that had once held me captive. But hearing my daughter call my name, broke something open inside me. Tears streamed down my face, hot and unstoppable. I clamped a hand over my mouth so no one in the hallway would hear. My shoulders shook with silent sobs, 3 years of grief and rage and desperate, lonely endurance all pouring out of me at once. The day of my divorce, I didn't cry. The night I was thrown out of my own home, bleeding from the head in the rain, I didn't cry. Through all of Margaret's abuse, through Nathan's cruelty, through the endless exhausting struggle of rebuilding my life from ashes, I had held it together. But this tiny person, this little girl with my eyes and her own fierce spirit, she was everything I had been fighting for. She was the reason I had gotten up every morning and worked until my body gave out. She was the proof that I was not what they said I was. That I was not barren, not worthless, not nothing. I was someone's mother. And I had done it all on my own. I watched the video 3 more times, tears still streaming. Then I dried my eyes, fixed my makeup in the reflection of the conference room window, and texted Lucy back. Tell Mom and Dad to bring Lily to the city. I've got a place ready. We're not going to live apart anymore. The reply came almost instantly, really? Elena, are you serious? I've never been more serious about anything in my life. 1 month later. The courtroom was packed. Nathan Zimmers stood at the defendant's table, his arrogance finally stripped away, leaving behind a hollow-eyed man who looked older than his years. His hair, unwashed and uncombed, was already showing gray. His suit, the same one he had been wearing the day of his arrest, now cleaned but still rumpled, hung loosely on a frame that had lost weight in county lockup. Beside him, Vincent Shaw radiated a different energy, cold fury, tightly controlled. He kept glancing toward the door as if expecting someone to walk in and save him. No one did. Margaret sat in the gallery, alone on a hard wooden bench. She was not allowed to sit with her son. She was technically a defendant too, though her case had been handled separately. Her house arrest ankle monitor was visible beneath the hem of her skirt. She looked smaller than I remembered. Shrunken. Her eyes kept drifting toward me, and each time they did, her expression flickered with something I couldn't quite name. Hatred. Yes. But also something that looked almost like disbelief. Even now, even after everything, she couldn't comprehend how this had happened. How the woman she had dismissed as worthless had dismantled her entire family from the inside out. The bailiff called the court to order. The judge entered. The charges were read. On the count of conspiracy to commit extortion, guilty. On the count of fraud, guilty. On the count of criminal intimidation, guilty. Nathan Zimmer received 4 years. Vincent Shaw, whose rap sheet was considerably longer, received 8. Chris Zimmer, whose testimony against his brother and Shaw had bought him a reduced sentence, walked away with probation and mandatory gambling addiction treatment, a small mercy, but one I didn't begrudge him. He had been a tool. A weak, stupid tool, but a tool nonetheless. The people who had wielded him were the ones who deserved the full weight of the law. Margaret Zimmer, due to her age and her marginally lesser role in the scheme, was sentenced to 1 year, suspended to probation. She would not go to prison. But the terms of her probation forbade her from contacting me or any member of my family, directly or indirectly, for any reason. If she violated that order, the suspended sentence would be revoked. She would spend the rest of that year behind bars. As the sentences were read, Margaret turned to look at me. Her lips moved. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read them on her mouth. This isn't over. I held her gaze for a long moment. Then I turned away. It was over. She just didn't know it yet. After the hearing, I was walking toward the courthouse exit when I heard quick footsteps behind me. Ms. Lin. I turned. The woman standing there was maybe 40, elegantly dressed, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of recent sleepless nights. She looked vaguely familiar, but it took me a moment to place her. She saw my confusion and introduced herself. I'm Rebecca Shaw. Vincent's wife. Soon-to-be ex-wife. I stiffened. Mrs. Shaw. Please. Rebecca. She held up a hand as if to ward off any hostility. I'm not here to make trouble. I wanted to say something to you, and I didn't know how else to do it. She took a breath. I found out about everything. The scheme. The affair. The debts. Vincent had been lying to me for years. Years. Her voice wavered, then steadied. If you hadn't done what you did, if you hadn't exposed all of it, I might never have known. I might have spent the rest of my life married to a man I didn't know at all. She looked me directly in the eye. So thank you. Thank you for blowing my life up. It needed to be blown up. I didn't know what to say. In the hierarchy of people who had wronged me, Vincent Shaw was near the top. But his wife. She was just another woman who had trusted the wrong man. Another woman who had been lied to, drained, left in the dark while her partner built a secret life on a foundation of deceit. I knew what that felt like. I'm sorry, I said. Not for what I did, but for what you're going through. It gets better. I promise. Rebecca smiled. It was a tired smile, but a genuine one. I believe you. She walked away, and I watched her go, a woman starting over, just like I had, 3 years ago. Outside the courthouse, the sun was blinding. Lucy pulled up to the curb in the car I had bought her, a sensible sedan she had insisted on despite my offers to get her something flashier. The passenger window rolled down to reveal my mother in the front seat, and in the back, my father, with Lily on his lap. "Mama!" Lily saw me and erupted into a full-body wiggle of joy, her arms stretching toward me, her little fingers grasping at the air. She was wearing a new dress, yellow, with tiny white flowers, and her hair had been pulled into two stubby pigtails that stuck out from the sides of her head like excited antennae. I crossed the pavement in 3 quick strides and took her from my father's arms. She melted against me, soft and warm and smelling of baby shampoo and sunshine. Her hands patted my cheeks, my nose, my ears, as if checking to make sure I was really there. "Mama, mama, mama," she chanted, a nonsensical stream of syllables that seemed to delight her. She had only learned the one word, but she was using it for everything now: hunger, joy, curiosity, the simple pleasure of making sound. Everything was "Mama." And every time she said it, my heart cracked open a little more. "Elena." My mother leaned out the car window, her eyes glistening. "Is it really over? For good?" "It's over, Mom." I pressed a kiss to Lily's forehead. "For good. Oh, thank God." My mother's voice broke. "Thank God. I've been so scared. Every night. For 3 years. So scared they'd find you again. So scared they'd hurt you. They can't hurt me anymore." She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. My father, stoic as always, said nothing, but he reached through the window and squeezed my shoulder, and that one gesture said more than words ever could. "Come on," Lucy said, her voice bright with the effort of holding back her own tears. "I booked us a table at that Italian place you like. The one with the homemade pasta. We're celebrating." "What are we celebrating?" Lucy grinned. "Everything." The restaurant was warm and noisy, filled with the clatter of plates and the murmur of conversations and the occasional burst of laughter from the bar. We took a table near the window, and Lily sat in a high chair at the end, conducting an elaborate experiment in which she dropped a breadstick on the floor, watched someone pick it up, and then dropped it again to see if the same thing would happen. It did. Every time. I watched my family, my real family, as they passed plates and argued over wine selections and took turns entertaining the baby. My mother, whose hand still bore the calluses of a lifetime of hard work, was laughing at something Lucy had said. My father, who had never been comfortable expressing emotion, was sneaking bits of pasta to Lily when he thought no one was looking. This was what I had fought for. Not revenge. Not vindication. This. "Hey." Lucy nudged me with her elbow. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" "The thing where you zone out and get all misty-eyed. You've been doing it a lot lately." I blinked and realized my eyes were wet. Again. It seemed to be happening more and more these days, as if the wall I had built around my emotions was slowly crumbling, letting in light I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. "I'm just happy," I said. Lucy leaned her head against my shoulder. "Good. You deserve it." After dinner, we walked through the park near the restaurant. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange and gold. Lily had fallen asleep in my arms, her face slack and peaceful, her breath warm against my neck. "Elena." My mother fell into step beside me. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you. All those years, when you were going through the divorce, when you found out you were pregnant, when you were working yourself to death to start the company, how did you do it? How did you keep going?" I thought about the question for a long time. "I didn't have a choice," I said finally. "There was no backup plan. No safety net. If I failed, Lily would grow up with nothing, just like I almost did. And I refused to let that happen. I shifted Lily's weight in my arms. You know what Margaret said to me the night I left? She said, "You're nothing without this family." And at the time, part of me believed her. Part of me thought she was right. That I was worthless. That I couldn't survive on my own. "But you did," my mother said softly. "I did. And you know what I realized? I was never nothing. I was never worthless. They just needed me to believe I was, because it made me easier to control." I looked down at Lily's sleeping face. No one is ever going to make my daughter feel that way. Not while I'm alive. We walked in silence for a while, the gravel path crunching beneath our feet. "Your name," my mother said suddenly. "You changed it. After the divorce. From Elena Lin to Elena Lin." "Why?" I smiled. "Because I wanted to be someone new. Someone they couldn't find. Someone they couldn't touch." Did it work? I looked at my daughter. At my sister, walking ahead of us with her arm linked through our father's. At the sunset painting the world in impossible colors. "Yeah," I said. "It worked." That night, I lay in bed with Lily sprawled beside me, her tiny chest rising and falling with the rhythm of deep, untroubled sleep. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number: "This isn't over." I stared at the screen for a moment. Margaret. Even after everything, the trial, the probation, the threat of prison, she still couldn't let go. She still needed the last word. I typed a reply. Then I deleted it without sending. Some battles aren't worth fighting. Some people aren't worth one more second of your time. I turned off the phone and pulled Lily closer. She murmured something in her sleep and nestled against me, her small hand fisting in the fabric of my shirt. Outside the window, the city glittered in the darkness, a million lights, a million stories, a million people fighting their own private battles. 3 years ago, I had been one of them. Broken. Bleeding. Sitting on a bus stop bench in the rain, wondering if I would ever be whole again. Now I was exactly where I belonged. I pressed a kiss to my daughter's forehead and closed my eyes. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, when sleep came, it was deep and dreamless and entirely at peace. I had spent 3 years running. I was done running now. I was home.